So, hello, it's lovely to see you all. I'm really surprised that so many of you bothered to turn up. But anyway, thank you for doing so. There are, of course, just too many questions. So I mean, it's the luck of the draw, really. So please forgive me if your really important burning question hasn't been answered, because we only have limited time and I also have only limited energy. So, okay, so this is just how it's come, right? So please, right, so, okay, so this one says, after a few years of practice, now I am super aware of my defilements. My greed, especially with food, and aversion that shows up mainly in irritation. I'm trying to be compassionate, but I tend to be hard on myself and feel shame. I police myself and it makes things worse. Do you have any advice? So I start with this one because I thought this is something which is actually quite common. When we often meet people when they start on a spiritual path, think they're pretty much okay, you know, but it would enhance life to have a spiritual path to give meaning on top of all the other things which are happening in my life. But then once we start looking and becoming more conscious of what's going on inside and not so much blaming everything on other people and other outer circumstances, but recognizing that so much of our suffering and troubles comes from our own response to what happens to us, not just what happens to us, then we can go through a period of disillusionment, shall we say, with ourselves. We recognize that actually we are full of these defilements or klesha, which previously we have mostly thought belonged to everybody else. Now, as we look, we see actually we're full of it. And so then we feel bad because we know we shouldn't be full of all these kleshas. And by rights, it should be easy to say, aha, I recognize, now I'm feeling irritated. Oh, look at that nice chocolate cake. I'm not going to eat it because that would be greedy. And so forth, so that we begin to recognize these klesha when they turn up, but just recognizing them doesn't get rid of them. And as this person here says, you know, he tries to be compassionate, but he tends to be hard on himself and police themselves, and that makes things worse. So therefore, what to do? Now, there are many different approaches that one could take to dealing with our kleshas, depending on the level of our practice. But in general, the first thing we have to do is to recognize it. Even just quietly name it. Greed, anger, jealousy, pride, without making any particular judgmental comments on that. If we are, for example, take anger. A lot of people get very upset by themselves, by other people, by what's happening, and we get angry with the anger. And we want to get rid of the anger because people don't like us when we're angry, and we don't like ourselves when we're angry. So we push down that anger and close the door on it, slam, and then that's it. Okay, I'm not really angry. I'm just looking at the situation very realistically. And so in that unacceptance and that pushing back down into the darkness, it creates a lot of problems. So, the point is that whatever kleshas arise, we should recognize them and bring them into the light of our consciousness, not push them back down into the darkness. And sometimes that takes a lot of courage, especially if they are very deep emotions that we don't want to look at. What we need is to sit quietly, calm our mind, and then bring up those very emotions which normally we want to either get rid of or to deny or to transform in some miraculous way. What we don't want is just to look them in the face and say, hello. Because what we need to do is to make friends. This is a huge subject. I could spend the next 2 hours just talking on this subject because it's a very important way of dealing with all our negative emotions. Here I'm talking about anger, but it could be anything. Somebody mentions greed, and some people, they get jealous or whatever. It doesn't matter. So, one thing is, for example, there's a story in, I don't know where to begin, there's so many things you could say about this. One of the things is that if we get continually start to feel anger, the anger comes up very, very easily. This is sometimes because we are not friends with ourselves. Inwardly, we are angry with ourselves. We haven't come up to our own expectations. And then this irritation with ourselves gets projected out as irritation about everybody else. So the Buddha said, this is very important. If we look back at the early sutras, the Buddha, what did the Buddha advise? Well, of course, he advised, first of all, good ethical conduct, in other words, living in the world harmlessly by not killing, stealing, and lying, etc. So you have the nice ethical basis. Then to do shamatha meditation, because shamatha helps the mind to become more attentive, more focused, and at the same time, it increases our awareness, our mindfulness. We become more clear, more present. I mean, for example, if we're focusing on the ingoing and outgoing of the breath, then at that moment, while we're practicing, we cannot breathe in the past or the future. We only breathe now. So if at that time we are conscious of breathing, it's the one time when the mind can have a rest and be present in this moment without comment. So shamatha meditation is very, very helpful for healing our psyche. Now, Buddhism, as you all know, is very famous for all its ego bashing, right? No self. So don't talk even about self. But in fact, to live in this world genuinely without a sense of this small egocentric self It's a very high spiritual level. And so therefore, for the rest of us, the Buddha recommended that we make friends with ourselves. And people don't remember that. He said we start with the 4 Brahma Viharas, the 4 illimitable meditations, and the first one is to send loving kindness and compassion and rejoicing to ourselves. May I be well and happy. May I be peaceful and at my ease. May I be free from suffering. Simply saying there is no self, there is no ego, doesn't solve the problem. Who is saying there is no I? Me. Right? The ego is saying, oh no, ego, you don't exist. Well, that's very nice, but the ego just says, right, now I'm going to be egoless. Right? So now you're going to have an egoless ego. So the Buddha said, first we get a healthy, well-balanced sense of self. We make friends with ourselves, because just saying there's no self doesn't solve the problem. Just saying it's all empty doesn't solve the problem. That's not emptiness. And so first, we have to have a healthy and confident sense of being, that we make friends. And so while we are making friends first with ourselves, then with our loved ones, those we're indifferent towards, people we find difficult, the whole world, this makes the mind very warm and soft. I mean, even just thinking of someone, or your dog or your cat, it doesn't matter who. How lovely if they could be well and happy. Wouldn't that be beautiful? And really wish it. And then, as I say, take that warmth and give it to ourselves. Now, when we have started to create a kind of good feeling inside ourselves, towards ourselves, that then extends out towards other people. We need other people. Other people are the means for us to cultivate these good qualities. I mean, it's one thing sitting on our cushion thinking, may all beings be well and happy, and then we open the door and there are the beings. Yeah. So we need to do both, right? It's very important. We need to breathe in, we need to breathe out. There's no point in just breathing in. We will asphyxiate, right? So we breathe in, we breathe out, we breathe in, we breathe out. Our formal practice helps our dealing with others. Our dealing with others helps us to understand our formal practice. So, there's a anecdote. It might be in the life of Milarepa, I'm not sure. But anyway, some yogi, he goes back to his cave and he sees these 5 demons in his cave. So he does very Mahakala mantras and gives them the whole lot. And they just sit there. Well, that didn't work. Okay. Empty. Empty. It's all the projection of the mind. It's all empty. So then, that didn't work. So then he says, okay, you are welcome. You are my guests. My little cave, here you are. Let's all have a nice cup of tea. So then he turns around and he starts making up his fire, puts on the pot, puts in water and some leaves and boils it up and said, "How nice that you've come to visit me. I'm so grateful. I don't get many visitors." And then he turns around to offer the tea to the demons, and meanwhile the demons have transformed into beautiful local deities. And they say, "We want to be your disciples and we will follow you and we will protect you." And no more demons. Because he befriended them. He did not see them as an enemy or a threat. He saw them as sentient beings who would maybe like a nice cup of tea. And so that's a very, very good example of how to deal with our kleshas, not by trying to throw them out or deny them, but to befriend them. So if thoughts of anger come up, we can allow them to be there and, as it were, offer a cup of tea. In other words, say, "How are you? What's your problem? Why aren't you happy? Tell me all about it." A lot of our anger and our fear is pre-verbal level, really. And it's something, some trauma we might have had when we were young or when we got older. But trying to push it away doesn't work. We need to befriend and transform in that way our anger, our greed, by acknowledging it, and at the same time, of itself, it begins to have not such a tight hold, right? It begins to loosen up, become more workable, and we can see it more clearly with loving eyes. And since it's never been loved in all its life, it changes. And so this is very important for dealing with anger. I know we just went through the patience chapter of Shantideva with the nuns. And of course, he gives many good advice on how to deal with anger. But the one thing he doesn't say is that he wants us to make our kleshas into an enemy. And I think psychologically that's not such a good idea. That rather than make them into an enemy, we can listen to what they have to say and replace that negative emotion by a softer emotion. When we are talking about loving all sentient beings, then we can also think about loving also all these difficult emotions which we experience, to hold them up and look at them and ask them what they need and what they want. I mean, people are quite attracted to the idea in Vajrayana that the essential nature of our kleshas, of our afflictive emotions, is wisdom. And so, you know, they want to know how to turn afflictive emotions into wisdom. But that takes a very deep ability to see the affliction at the moment of arising. If we wait a minute down the road, it's already too late. But if at the moment of arising we see it nakedly, then of itself it will transform into a very vibrant, positive energy. Because all these kleshas which we have in our mind are not intrinsic to the mind. They are called adventitious, which means that they're not really part of the mind. It's like if you have a silver pot and we don't clean it, then it becomes black. And all the tarnish, when we look at the pot, all we see is black. But that tarnish is not inherent in the pot. So, therefore, it can be cleaned. And if we clean it, rubbing it away, then we see that it's still the same old silver pot. The silver itself has never tarnished. Do you understand? So these negative emotions are not our true nature. And because they're not our true nature, we can deal with them. And we can see them for what they are and have a dialogue. There's a book by, my mind is not at its best at this moment. What's her name?
What's the title? What's the title of the
Sotomayor, called
Feeding Your Demons.
Meeting Your Demons.
Feeding
Your Demons. And it's based on the idea of chur, where you offer up the body to all the demons in order to liberate them. And it's quite a useful technique not to be afraid of things which are negative, but to welcome and befriend them. And this is also why it's helpful to start by befriending ourselves, so that then we are at peace within ourselves. We can then look at all the various faults we have and deal with them skillfully, not pushing them away or wishing they were gone, but really trying to understand the energy and wisdom even within these negative forces. So it would be good for any of us, to cultivate our shamatha and cultivate the four sublime emotions, like loving kindness. Loving kindness, somebody said, people don't like the word loving kindness anymore. So talk about befriending. Because actually the word metta or maitri comes from the word for a friend. So what we're trying to do is befriend ourselves, other beings, and also these parts of ourselves which we don't want to acknowledge. Bring them up and make friends. And then they turn into something quite different. The demons turn into local deities. I mean, not maybe instantly, but gradually we begin to understand why these negative emotions come up, how they harm ourselves, harm others, and come up with skillful ways to transform them into their corresponding wisdom, like envy and envy. The other side is rejoicing. Right? When somebody has something which I want, and then I feel envious of them, well, the thing is to think how happy they are and rejoice for them. Why not? And then there's no envy. Right? So there are many, many books which deal with how to deal skillfully with your emotions. Don't give up, because the true nature is completely pure and perfect. And all we have to do is work at revealing these things, not as enemies, but as potential friends. There is a video clip, I should just mention. There is this video clip of this woman in the ocean, and she has her arm in the mouth, down the throat of a shark. Now, if you can imagine any of us swimming in the ocean and meeting with a shark, the last thing we will likely to want to do is put our arm into its mouth. But this woman has apparently, even at that time, and it's a fairly old clippage, removed 300 hooks from the throat of these poor shark. Because, you know, fishermen, you know, they're fishing and then the shark manages to struggle and break the line and swim away. But it's got a hook in its throat. And I don't know how she first discovered that she could do this. But anyways, there she is with her arm in the shark, and all around her are swimming shark. In other words, the worst possible thing that could possibly happen to you in the ocean, for her, it's the most beautiful thing, because all these sharks are waiting for her to help them too. And clearly the word has gone around in the shark world that there is this woman who, because of her great compassion, has no fear for these sharks. She's their friend. They obviously love her very deeply and totally trust her to help them. And to my mind, that is how we have to deal with our negative emotions. Instead of fighting them or trying to harm them or deny them, we befriend them and help them with our compassion. And as the woman with the sharks, likewise, we, with our negative emotions, discover actually we can deal with them, because they want also to be helped. So if we bring loving kindness and compassion, even to the dark side of ourselves, of itself it begins to transform. We don't really have to do anything except to see it and look and listen to what they're telling us. Then that of themselves begins to make a shift. Okay? Well, I've sort of gone on a long time about that. But it's very important, because we all have defilements. Everybody. And therefore, it's not a matter of feeling, oh, I'm such a bad person and everybody else is so good. Everybody has something. It's not this, it's that. That's not the problem. If we have, for example, angry people, then we can bring how to deal skillfully with anger as the path. Right? We take the very thing which we consider to be the main obstacle and use it to work with, and in that way begin to transform our inner landscape. But everybody has something, unless you're really a very, very highly advanced master, but almost everybody has something. It's not this and it's that. And not to see that as the obstacle, but to see that as the opportunity. Right, okay, I've got this very angry temperament. That's what I'm going to learn to deal with. Anger and greed are the main ones. And of course, they are based on our inherent ignorance. So, you know, the wheel of life, right? In the middle, there are the three animals. The snake and the cockerel and the pig, representing these basic defilements of the mind, basic closure, going round and round and sending the whole wheel round and round and round. So that's what we have to deal with, right? It's no good dealing with the outer. We get right to the heart of the problem. And if we can overcome that, then we can overcome everything. So these kleshas need not be an obstacle for us. They are our opportunity to really work with something. I mean, I saw a book. There's these books called The Dummy's Guide to, you know, so they have all sorts of things. And this was The Dummy's Guide to Overcoming Anger. This thick. It was about 900 pages. So this is not just your problem. And they probably sold a lot of copies of that book. And what was interesting, I was looking through it, a lot of the techniques which they came up to are actually Buddhist. They didn't say so, but in fact, it was very recognizably various Buddhist antidotes on how to overcome anger, especially. So, look it up. There's so much out there. And to recognize that our dealing with whichever is our particular negative emotion is the practice, is the path to help us to get beyond it. There's just one more antidote, because this is such an important thing. This guy who's very angry type, so he went to a weekend course in America, I think, on overcoming, on the 4 Brahma Viharas, and especially loving kindness. And he was sitting there the whole time thinking, God, this is a lot of nonsense. Oh my God, why did I come to this? It cost me so much and it's just a waste of time, absolutely useless. What does he say we have to do now? Okay, let's try. And at the end, he left also feeling very grumpy, and that was a complete waste of time. He could have been playing golf, and instead he was sitting there thinking, may all beings be well and happy. And then he was driving off, and he was driving into this car park, and another car cut in front of him and took the space that he was aiming for. And he thought, well, that was very clever. That was really a good move. Oh, good. And they said, what do you mean, oh, good? I'm supposed to be angry. I'm supposed to be swearing at him. I'm supposed to be blowing my horn. And he wasn't. He said he felt perfectly peaceful. He was even happy that the guy had got that space so cleverly, and he went off and found another space for himself. But then he thought, God, this stuff actually might work. And it does work. We just have to change our neural pathways. You know, if you think of anger as being like a 4-lane highway, we always go up that way. But then we recognize it ends at a crash. So that's not very sensible. Let's go a different way. Then when we go through a different way, there's no path. Instead of being angry, we think, may you be well and happy. So there's no path for that. But if we keep going that way, again and again and again, eventually we create a path. Meantime, the 4-lane highway, the grass is growing up through the cracks because nobody's using it anymore. So it's practice. Again and again and again and again until it becomes natural. And it can be done because so many people have already done it throughout the centuries. Because our negative emotions are not part of who we are. So they can be transformed. Haha. This is supposed to be short, but they go on forever. All right, so this is something completely different. Do we have any control over our choices in life, or is it just a script already written by God, and we are just playing our roles? And if we are forced or bounded to play and do our karma, do we get punished for karma? Right, so that's nicely full of all sorts of wrong views. So we'll leave out the bit about the script being written by God I don't think God would be that unfeeling. You know, why has he created all these beings and then punished them for something they've never done? Right? I mean, if you're a child and you're brought up in a war area, or you're brought up in a dysfunctional home where, you know, your mother and the siblings are regularly beaten up and abused or whatever, but you haven't done anything. Why would God do that to you? It seems a very strange kind of God. It doesn't sound very loving. The Buddhist view, as of course you all know, is that our actions of body, speech, and mind have accumulated for countless lifetimes. And karma means intentional actions, not just any actions. If I'm walking along and I see an ant and I deliberately step on it, then that is making a karmic seed based on dislike, anger, or anything. But anyway, it's a negative seed of taking the life of another being. But if we're walking along the road and I'm looking up at the trees and accidentally I step on an ant and kill it, that does not create karma because it was not intentional. If I had seen the ant, I would have stepped over. So that's the point, it's an intentional action of body, speech, and mind. But since we've made billions and billions of seeds throughout all our lifetimes, we just don't know when a seed is going to ripen. When the causes and conditions come together, something will happen and the seed will come. Something will happen to us. There's always something's happening. That's the past. We can't do anything with that one. But how we respond to what is happening is creating the future. So moment to moment, we are eating up the past and creating the future. It's ongoing. So therefore, sometimes we hit a bad patch for whatever causes and conditions come up, which are very negative. But it doesn't mean that all the past seeds are negative. That's just a little clump of negative seeds. After that, eventually they will become positive. The more so if we, on our side, do not respond by making more negativity. That even when really difficult things happen to us, sickness, loss, poverty, abuse, all these horrible things which happen to us, if we respond skillfully without creating more problems, then that becomes the opportunity for creating very positive karma, if not this moment, then in the future. So it's an ongoing process, that's the point. And nobody's life is exactly set down in stone. I mean, depending on our family and our cultural background, certain things will happen. But then again, how we respond to that, how we deal with that, will create the causes conditions for other karma to come up. So we don't know, moment to moment. It's very, you know, there may be a certain direction, but nonetheless, how we are responding to the circumstances which we are meeting with is going to change the pattern as we go along. I mean, there's a story in the Pali Canon about one time the Buddha was outside one of the towns, outside the town walls with his monks, and there was a drunkard who had just died, and he had been slung out of the city, which is there, you know, like a tramp. And the Buddha said, this man had a choice. He was from a very good family, but he had a choice either to become a monk or to stay in the household. And if he had become a monk, he would have become an arahat. He would have been liberated. But he chose to stay in the household. And then he got into drink, he got into gambling, he got into all sorts of bad ways, and he finally was thrown out by his family. And as you see, he just died impoverished, drunkard, outside the city walls. So the Buddha said that you see the same opportunities were there, and basically he chose the wrong path. So if he had chosen a different path, it was his choice. If he had chosen a different path, then he could have been liberated. So that's the point. Moment to moment, we are making choices. And whether they are skillful choices or unskillful choices will set in action what comes next. It's not all, written down in and carved in stone. We always have a choice. People say, oh, I had no choice. It's not true. We do have a choice. Some choices are difficult, but they're there. And so part of the reason for developing mindfulness and awareness is that we can see more clearly how to respond skillfully, especially in difficult times, so that we begin to plant more and more good ripe seeds. I mean, if you plant a poison seed, you'll get a poison plant. If you plant a good seed, then you will get a good plant. So it all depends on us in the end. We blame other people, but actually we ourselves have created the environment in which we find ourselves now, and how we act, whether skillfully or unskillfully, is up to us. So this is why, as I say, to develop the ability to be poised so that we can see what is a skillful action and what is a non-skillful action, and we have the ability to make the right choices, which, even if we have a difficult life, this time we have gained in wisdom and understanding, and we haven't wasted the life. So karma is very important in Buddhism, and the idea of throwing it out, because I don't know why. I mean, there's a very interesting book on karma. If you are interested in karma, there are two books which would be useful. One is a book called, I don't know what it's called, Roger Jackson. Rebirth, okay? There's a book called Rebirth. Roger Jackson is an American scholar, and he has written his book on the attitudes towards rebirth and karma in all the different Buddhist schools. So starting with the Theravada, then the early Mahayana, later Mahayana, Nagarjuna, Asanga, Madhyamaka, Yogacara, the Tantras, all the different kinds of threads, Zen, very skillfully written, because he shows how in all these schools, including Nagarjuna, everybody believed in rebirth and karma. And so even Nagarjuna, who is, no, he's still saying, but on a relative level, yes. Don't lose your ethics, don't lose your practice, even though on an ultimate level it might all be empty, that doesn't mean that on a relative level where we all are existing, these things are not how they are. So he also teaches very much on the importance of rebirth and our karmic actions. So that's a very interesting book, because he not only goes through them all, and he doesn't have any agenda. I think he's fairly agnostic. But he goes through all the schools, and there's not one single school in Buddhism, including Zen, which does not uphold the doctrine of rebirth and karma. So we can't say that's, you know, it was just something the Buddha picked up along the way because that's what everybody believed in. Actually, his own interpretation was very different from how karma was taught in those days. The other book, which is a good book, is by Tralek Rinpoche, and I think it's just called Karma. So we are not bound to play and carry out our karma. Moment to moment to moment, it's shifting. And, you know, going this way or going that way or going straight ahead, depending on our responses to the situations which we meet with. It's very fluid. Oh, I'm looking at something nice and simple.
Do you want to check from this one? Do we want to check from this one, from the online one?
Okay, well, let's do something different. What is the importance of devotion in recognizing our true nature? Well, and then the next one is how to gain confidence in the natural state, which is our true nature. Right? Well, the best way to gain confidence is to realize it. And then once you've realized it, you know it exists. Devotion is kind of a tricky subject, especially nowadays. But basically, what they're saying is, for example, when one does visualization practices, and for example sees oneself as Manjushri, right? So you see yourself as Manjushri, and then Manjushri, of course, represents great wisdom, the seeing things as they really are. And then at the end of the practice, then the deity, whether seen as oneself or in front of oneself, dissolves into light. The light goes round through the top of the head, down into the heart, and mixes with the seeds that are in the heart, and then they all mix together into light. And with a total spacious, open relaxation. Not, you know, tightly, now I have to see the light going down here and now it's going to mix with the seeds, but very, very fluidly, very lightly, very spaciously. One merges one's mind with the mind of the deity. And one can really only do that through devotion. The recognition that our true nature is the deity. The deity isn't some god you pray to. It's the symbol of our true nature, if only we could recognize it. And the quickest way to recognize it is considered to be through devotion. I mean, there is a saying that maybe through meditation we might get there, but for sure through devotion you'll get there. Trungpa Rinpoche said it was like a corridor, and there are two doors. And so the Lama's door is always open. But whether our door is open or closed is up to us. If we open it, then the blessings flow. If we close it because we have doubts, then we are not illumined because we've closed the door. If you close all the shutters and the door and then say it's dark, That's not the fault of the sun. The sun is shining, but whether or not we go out and look at the sun is up to us. This whole question, especially of devotion to the Guru, is, of course, a very loaded one, especially in these days. If one has a teacher who is genuinely worthy of trust, then devotion is definitely the fastest way, because all you need to do then is to open up your heart, and then the blessings, of showing the nature of the mind will come. But of course, in this day and age, it's very difficult for people to trust. And one cannot say, yes, you can trust that one, but not that one. It's very tricky. So if one feels challenged at the thought of having unquestioning devotion and pure perception towards another human being, one can, in that case, also develop openness and trust and devotion to someone who has already gone. Like many people, Nyingmas and others, pray to Guru Rinpoche. Now that's very safe. We know what he got up to, so we don't have any worries about that. So if, really having total devotion to the embodiment of enlightenment as represented, for example, by Guru Padmasambhava or Milarepa or Tsongkhapa or whoever, that if you have that devotion, and people do, then that is a very safe way of being able to surrender. Because what we're surrendering is our little self to open up into our true nature. This is why they're talking about the true nature, how to recognize the true nature. And that devotion, genuine devotion, is probably the quickest way to do it. But if one is not the devotional kind, then the way to recognize the true nature is through recognizing it. We often think of the nature of the mind or the Buddha nature as something incredibly vast and big and somehow out there that we have to attain to, instead of recognizing that the nature of the mind is the very fundamental, primordial nature of our consciousness, our own consciousness. It's not out there, it's here. And we have it the whole time, which is why you can hear me and see me and think. It's just our pure consciousness, that quality of knowing. And the Nyingmas call it rikpa, which means knowing, knowledge. It's that quality of knowing, non-dual consciousness before the split into knower and known. Right? Even while we are doing mindfulness or awareness, there is a duality. There is the awareness of something. But the nature of the mind goes beyond that. It's why it's compared to space. Because space, we can't grasp it. We can't, put it in a box and say, this is my space. Space is all-pervading. It's everywhere. We also are just space. The table, which seems so hard, is space. It's all space, and it's all interconnected and interdependent. But we don't see it because we are caught in our duality of observer and observed. So sometimes, especially if the mind is at rest and relaxed, suddenly like the whole fabric of our consciousness kind of parts, and there it is. I mean, it's not fireworks, it's just, oh. And then, of course, the ego quickly claims it for its own, and we've lost it again. So after that, the point is to stabilize the actual realization. But in itself, it's not so much. Just now we were in Tashijong watching the Lama dances, the Guru Rinpoche Lama dances, which they do every year. And a friend of mine, she was a kind of middle-aged English lady, and she and her mother both became nuns. But she told me, and she was basically Gelugpa, she wasn't Drupakaju. But she went one time to the dances. She was sitting there watching the Black Hat dance. And in those days, my former Lama, Kamtu Rinpoche, danced, as did all the tulkus and monks. So she was just sitting there, obviously very relaxed, watching them dancing. And then as Rinpoche turned and looked at her, in that moment, she got a very powerful realization of the nature of the mind. And then, of course, Rinpoche was dancing on, and it completely changed her life. That's why she became a nun. But she was in a state of open, relaxed awareness without expecting anything, right? And because she was so open, that door was open, Rinpoche's door was always open, so she got it. And so it's like that, it's so simple. One time I was asking for a lung, you know, in the Tibetan tradition, you're not supposed to read a book until it's been read to you. So I was reading something called the Karisholap, the Flight of the Garuda, which is a book on Dzogchen. And I had asked one of our Tokden Archer, to give the lung. So he was going along giving the lung, and then he put the book down, and he said, the trouble with these texts is that they make it sound so fantastic and amazing and unattainable. He said, but it's so simple. There it is. And so I said, oh, thank you. But I think that's the point, that, you know, we think it must be something really special, and in one way it is very special because it can transform people's lives. They recognize what they thought was so inherently solid is not at all the way we see things. And so that's why when people do get a recognition of the nature of the mind, it transforms their lives. But at the same time, like space, it's nothing that exciting. The things which are in the space might be very fascinating, the nyam, the experiences that people get when they meditate. But the actual recognition of the nature of the mind is almost, you could say, bland. I mean, this is what they say, that it's so simple we could miss it, because we're expecting something really, you know, luminous lights flashing here and there and great bliss and, you know, and it might just be, oh, that's it. So he's saying about devotion is a very, if we have a naturally devotional mind, it is a very quick way for getting back to the essence of the mind, the recognition of the mind. And how to gain confidence in a natural state is to drop everything, to relax. You know, the problem is we make everything into a goal that we have to achieve. And that attitude in itself closes the door. I'll tell you just one more story, and then I guess, are we supposed to have lunch?
We're at time just tomorrow.
Oh, we do? Another Western nun that I met, she was American, and she had these big scars, because she had a shaved head, right? So she had these big scars right across her head. So I said to her, you know, where did you get those scars? And she said, one time I was in Tushita in Dharamshala, and I was in the break, I was walking around the mountain, and I met a bear. And so the bear went for me, and next thing, my head was in the mouth of the bear. And so I thought, that's it, finish. And she said, I just completely let go. And I realized the nature of the mind. So then some other people came along and started throwing stones and making noise, and the bear left her. That's why she had these gashes from the teeth of the bear. She said, but then they took her to the hospital and she had all these stitches. They couldn't understand why she kept laughing. But after that, then she gave everything up and she became a nun. But that's the point. The key there was that she completely let go. And in that letting go, that release, she was able to have a direct experience of the nature of the mind. So the point is that the nature of the mind is closer to us than our own breathing, but we don't see it. You know, just as like if you come in the room and I say, well, what's in the room? Then people will say, well, there was a statue, and there was a chair, and there was cushions and cameras. But really what is here is space. But we don't see the space because we're too busy looking at the things. And this is what happens in the mind. We are so caught up in looking at our thoughts and our emotions and our feelings about this and that and whatever, that we don't recognize the underlying non-dual awareness, which is supporting everything. And it's compared to the sky because the sky is vast and infinite, and there's nowhere where the sky is not. But we don't see the sky because we're too busy looking at the clouds. And we get fascinated by the rainbows and the thunderclouds, and it's all very interesting, but we don't see that behind all that, and the clouds themselves are all just space, are all just sky. So we're always looking in the wrong direction. But the actual nature of the mind is never more or less. It's always just there, like space. And it interconnects us. The most important thing is that it interconnects us. Our dualistic thinking mind separates us. But when anybody who describes being in the nature of the mind, I thought Mingyur Rinpoche's example that he gives in his book about In Love with Life or something, his experience in nature when he was nearly dying, was very well done. How much that was Mingyur Rinpoche and how much that was somebody else. But his description not only of how it was totally natural, but also how it interconnected him with everything, including the trees and flowers and people and dogs. And there really is not a boundary that we normally, our dualistic mind creates. And for many people, this is the most powerful thing, which really changes their minds, is that sense of we are totally interconnected at our most profound level. Which is why also they say, you know, that if you have true devotion, for example, to your Lama or to whoever, to the deity, you are never apart. You're always there together. It's just our dualistic thinking which sees a separation. So it's really quite amazing, right, how we don't see something which is in actual fact the foundation for our consciousness. It will be interesting to see with the AIs, if somebody, one Zen master is trying to somehow inject Buddha nature into his AIs, so that was interesting. Considering they're not conscious, do they have karma? Yeah, call back in 5 years and we'll be able to maybe tell, right? So, yes, the most important thing is to tame the mind, our monkey mind. You get a tame monkey. It's still a monkey, but it's a tame monkey now. And tame monkeys are amenable to being trained. And as we train the mind, naturally it transforms. And when it transforms, eventually it transcends. It transcends into the pure nature of our awareness, which is always there. I mean, like, you know, the Buddha or a tramp, the nature of the mind is the same. It's not that we polish it. It's already there, completely perfect, completely pure. The only problem is we don't recognize it. And so, essentially, step by step, what we are trying to do is to come home to our true nature, which is just waiting, however many eons it may take, or in a second. Yes, so somebody here says they have a problem with being greedy about food. So the best thing to do is to eat mindfully, then you don't. That's a good idea.
That's a good idea.
If we eat mindfully, then we won't eat so much. So I hope everybody enjoyed their lunch. Okay. If one realized the effect of attachment, but it continues to affect him, what is the step in between that I'm missing? And they say, another one says, how can I not want? I think if I stop wanting, I become a vegetable. I'm afraid to let go of my desires. I think they are the driving force in life. If I don't want, I stop living. Do I even understand the desire correctly? To me, desire is synonymous with goals. How can I live without goals in life? So again, apart from the problem of anger and irritation, the other big thing is our greed, our grasping, our attachment, and so forth. And this naturally underpins so much of our life. So one problem is the word desire, which there are good desires and bad desires. I mean, obviously we desire to breathe, and therefore we breathe. We desire to get up in the morning, so what we get. That is not karmically negative. That's just, you know, keeps us going. We have to also remember that this is the kama loka. This is the realm of desire. There are three realms: the realm of desire, and then the rupa, the material realm, and the immaterial realm, which had to do with meditation and the jhanas. So all of us, and including most of the lower celestial realms, are all under the sway of desire. And so there are good desires and not so good desires. So it's not that we stop desiring per se. I mean, we desire to, get enlightened. We desire to help all living beings. We desire, to get rid of our anger or our jealousy. I mean, that's a good aspiration. And Tibetans spend hours on aspiration prayers, which are all about I want, basically, to lift the heart and broaden our vision. So it's not the desire in itself is not good or is wrong, but the important thing is, well, two important things. One is what we desire, and secondly, who is desiring anyway. But the desire in itself is neither, most desire is neither good nor bad. For example, like say you enjoy eating chocolate cake, and so every morning on the way to work you drop off at some place where they make extremely delicious chocolate cake, and you buy your chocolate cake for your mid-morning snack. That's not good, that's not bad, that just is. But then one day you go there and they don't have any chocolate cake. They've run out of chocolate cake and they offer us carrot cake. But we don't like carrots. And so we are not only extremely upset that they didn't save a slice of chocolate cake knowing that we want it, but also during the morning we are, again, our whole morning is out because we didn't have our nice, something exciting to look forward to. So then desire becomes a problem. In other words, as long as we are fulfilling our desires, we are happy, but when we cannot fulfill our desires, we get upset and annoyed, then that's a problem. Somebody said, Madam is wanting, but Madam is not getting. And that sums it up. So when Madam is not getting, what does Madam do? That is the question, right? There's nothing wrong with liking one thing and not liking something else. But when we can't get the thing we want and we can only get things we don't want, how do we respond? That is the problem. And if we say, oh, well, so what? Who cares? Then there's no problem. But if it really worries us when all our desires are not fulfilled, then of course that becomes a problem. So, I mean, until we really are on a very, very high spiritual level, we must also remember that most books, Dharma books, are written from the aspect of like an 8th level bodhisattva. But since not too many of us are probably 8th level bodhisattvas at the moment, we see that as the ideal, but it's not the practicality of how we actually are going to respond. So this is again why practices like mindfulness and awareness and just being conscious of what's going on in our mind at the time when it's going on is so important. Because then, you know, we don't get our chocolate cake annoyance, but we see, oh look, annoyance. And then in the seeing, it tends to dissipate because we've caught it and we can laugh at it. Laughter is a great antidote to many of our problems. We usually all take ourselves too seriously because we're ever so spiritual. And spiritual people don't do that. It says so in the book, right? No, no. So then we try to pretend that's how we're feeling when it's not what we're feeling. And that's when, you know, people get very difficult. I just heard from a friend of mine who had gone to work at a Dharma center in Australia. And last time I'd heard from her, she was about to go to work at this Dharma center. So she was very happy she was finally going to be surrounded by Dharma people. But this email says that she's left. Yeah. And the reason she left was because, essentially, because they were not kind. And she had thought that in a Dharma center, at least, you know, compared to society outside, that, you know, they would be friendly and warm and you know, nice people. But they weren't. And it seems to me, with all these, you know, high aims that we have of overcoming desire, overcoming anger, overcoming this, overcoming that, we have forgotten that really it would just be nice to be nice. As it turns, the Dalai Lama says, what's the aim of it all anyway? Well, to get a good heart. Even if we still have desire and a bit of anger and jealousy and all these other things, are we essentially nicer people now we have been in the Dharma for some years than we were when we started? I mean, even just asking ourselves that, forget about all the different bhumis and all the different, you know, seeing the nature of the mind and all that, that's lovely, but are we essentially an improvement on the old model? For one thing, do we laugh more? Because also, Buddhist converts at least tend to take themselves terribly seriously. Right? Our nuns are always laughing.
All the time.
And people notice it when they come to the nunnery, how jolly the nuns are, even though they live, you know, a relatively austere life. They get up at 5 and they're studying and practicing and doing pujas, and, you know, they don't have much time to themselves, but they're jolly. And, you know, by the time they collapse into bed at 11 at night, they're ready to sleep. But they don't take themselves too seriously. I guess because it's part of their culture. So it's not, but people who come in from outside, including Indians who were not brought up in the Buddhist area, they tend to take very literally everything they hear and read. And because, as I say, most of the instruction is for very, hopefully, advanced practitioners, and we're not advanced practitioners, therefore there's a clash between how we're supposed to be, according to the books, and how we actually are, which is not according to the books. So this question of desire comes into that. Desire is, we cannot eradicate desire just by wanting. It's very, more than anger. The Buddha said that anger, because it's a very negative emotion which causes a lot of trouble, is 8 times more karmically serious than greed and desire. But greed and desire is so much more difficult to overcome, because on the whole, we like it. We don't like being angry because people don't like us. And often we don't like ourselves and we do all sorts of things we shouldn't have done, and then we feel bad about it. But desire, if it is fulfilled, gives pleasure. And we mistake pleasure for happiness. And therefore we assume that the more pleasure we get and the more our desires lead us along, the happier we will be. And we don't understand that greed, the Buddha said, greed and grasping is the fundamental cause of dukkha, of suffering. It's hard to see that. I don't know how much I should go into that, but these desires, like the tentacles, reach right into the depths of our psyche. And so it's difficult to even recognize sometimes what is pushing us forward. I mean, often these things don't seem, they seem quite innocent, but they're not as innocent as it looks. It's a very complicated subject, and we don't have really much time to go into that one. So he's saying here, how can I not want? I think if I stop wanting, I become a vegetable. So the problem there is mistaking our greed for the natural process of living. I mean, the fact that we wake up in the morning and then we get up and then we desire, for example, to go to the bathroom and then maybe, have a cup of tea or coffee, or maybe sit down and do some practice. That's all based on wanting, but they in themselves are karmically quite neutral. It doesn't mean we don't ever want to do anything anymore. That's not what they're talking about. What they're talking about is the kind of desire which grasps us, that becomes either an obsession or an attachment, or based on this grasping of the mind. Like our mind has all these little hooks which catch us and keep us attached to various things. That is what we have to be able to look at and see, and whether or not that is helpful or not helpful. I mean, even the highest lamas, they have their food favorites, and certain things they enjoy doing, and probably other things they don't enjoy doing. It's not like they are exactly not like, they're happy, right? It's not that. I mean, they're people. We're all humans. That is not what traps us. What traps us is the grasping at results, and the grasping at, I like this, but therefore I don't like that. Because also our aversions are also a kind of grasping. So this is why, again, mindfulness is very helpful. Because, you know, I mean, look at the lamas, they're endlessly building, they never stop. I mean, they've been in India 60 years and they're still building. Don't say they have no desire, right? They have desire to have a bigger monastery than the one next door. Isn't it? I mean, when they started, they were little, modest little places, very sweet, very nice, the best they could afford. And then they discovered Taiwan, and then Korea, and then Vietnam, and now China also. And so all these big, huge monasteries are being built to satisfy the aspirations, we can now say politely. So it's not that we become nothing, it's not that we become blank, you know. So he's saying that, you know, I don't want to stop living. It's nothing to do with that. It's to do with recognizing the difference between affection and love and attachment. So this is the point. It's not even what we have or how much we have, but how much we cling to what we have. No? I mean, there's this story which you've probably all heard, but you can hear it again. Because many of the Mahasiddhas and great practitioners back in India also were very wealthy, and they were kings and wealthy businessmen and people like that, and that didn't prevent them in any way from practicing the Dharma, and it didn't mean they had to give everything up to do that. If they didn't want to, they could keep what they had. The important thing was how much they were attached to it. So there's this story of this wealthy king somewhere in India, and he had a big palace full of jewels and beautiful artifacts, and he was, you know, a connoisseur of the arts. But he was also a very devout king. And he had a guru. And his guru was the opposite. He was very, very ascetic. He only had a loincloth and a clay bowl. And that was all he possessed. So one time the king is in the gardens with his guru. The guru is giving him teaching. And then the servants from the palace come running up and saying, "Hey, Maharaj, Maharaj, quickly, come, come, come. The whole palace is on fire." And the king said, "Don't bother me. I'm getting Dharma from my guru. You deal with the fire. Okay? It's up to you." And then the guru jumps up and says, "What do you mean? I left my bowl in the palace." That's the point. That's the point. It's not what we own, but what owns us. And so don't worry too much. We can also have goals. And the reason why often we're told not to have goals, especially nowadays, is because so much of our life is taken up with goals. You know, it's scheduled for this, and then we get that, and then we get that, and then we'll get that. And so to stop that, to drop that, and not make our Dharma practice also goal-orientated, which is just another aspect of the ego. Now I want to do my ngundro, and I'm going to, everybody else is doing 100,000, I'm going to do 120,000. and they're all taking a year, I'm only going to take 6 months or whatever. This is just the ego using Dharma as a ploy to be one-upship again. So that is not good. But if we have an aspiration, right, well, I will definitely try to finish my Ngondro in 6 months if possible, or else I have to extend it if I can't manage it then. And you practice just to practice, and eventually the Ngondro is finished, then that's different. That is not, you're not trying to impress anybody. You're just trying to get some discipline into life, so that if we make little goals that we have to try to reach, it keeps us motivated. Desire is yeah, I mean, I cannot, unless one is really genuinely resting in the nature of the mind most of the time, I think it would be very difficult for most people to live without the ego getting in the way and setting its own agenda. As long as we are conscious of that, then it's not such a harm. We cannot expect us like that to be without desire. To desire to be desireless doesn't make sense. What happens is that gradually things which used to fascinate us no longer do. I remember one person, she went to Burma to do a retreat there, and in the end she stayed about a year or so, and then when she left she went back to Germany, where she was from, and what struck her immediately, to her surprise, was that all the things she had been looking forward to in getting back to Germany to be able to do, when she got there, she wasn't interested. She was really surprised to find that her sphere of interest had changed. And the things which she had previously really enjoyed, she no longer wanted to do. I mean, she wanted to do more practice and less going off to dancing. So that's when it begins to, shift, the shift in what is once very fascinating and which we really desired and felt that we couldn't live without, it would be so miserable. Suddenly we discovered that actually we couldn't care less. And that isn't what is calling us anymore. What we really want to do is something quite different, like go and do another retreat. Or go and share what you have learned with others. The level of clinging has changed. But that can only happen through an internal shift in our interest. It doesn't really work if we just tell ourselves, no, we shouldn't do that because somebody said we shouldn't do that, and not because we actually just wouldn't want to do that anyway, because we're not interested anymore. It's gone. Am I making sense? Sorry, I'm kind of... I mean, I always think of it like when we're children, when we're small children, and we have a favorite teddy bear, then if someone takes away our teddy bear, even if it's only got one eye and it's really dirty by now, nonetheless, it really hurts us because we are so attached to our teddy, and now they've taken it away and said we're too old for teddies. And we're not too old for teddies, because it's my teddy. And so there's no renunciation there. There's just the pain of somebody depriving us. But as we get older, then naturally we lose interest in teddy bears. So even if someone gave us the most beautiful teddy bear in the world, we could care less. We're interested in computers. We're interested in whatever we're interested in. That interest, we have outgrown an interest in teddies. We may have an interest in something else, but nonetheless, we have matured. Buddhism's always talking about maturation and liberation, mindrol. And so as we inwardly mature, not just outwardly, but inwardly, especially with the help of practice, then our interests shift from what they were when we were children. And because many people never really get to even that stage. Outwardly we look, very old. Inwardly people have the same emotions as a spoiled little 4-year-old, but they cloak it a little better sometimes. But inwardly we haven't matured. And so that's also what practice is about. It's about helping us to inwardly, with our emotions, our greed and our anger and our things, to gradually mature to the point where these things no longer control us and eventually slip away. It's again, if you can think of like in the summer, when the trees are all in flower and leaf, then if we pull off a leaf, there's resistance. It doesn't want to leave that tree. It's hard to pull the leaf off. But come autumn, then the leaves of themselves fall down in order to make way for new leaves to come up. And so that's what we need to do, that we're not just giving up things, giving up desires, just because we're told we have to. Because that's, the spiritual thing to do. But of itself, we lose interest, and those leaves that we had when we were younger just fall down and are replaced by new aspirations, new desires in the sense of wishing to really incorporate the Dharma in our heart and become genuine practitioners and put the refuge right in the center of our life, so that even during the day we are practicing. Everything which happens to us during the day is the opportunity to cultivate inner qualities, especially, of course, patience and kindness and compassion. And that replaces our previous responses, which were often annoyance and greed and anger in general. So we are evolving. We are transcending our earlier responses to life, and now we are using our whole life as the Dharma practice. All these wonderful qualities which we need to cultivate. First of all, our ethical conduct, to make sure that we don't do anything which creates any harm or hurt to anyone, that everyone with us is safe. We're not going to try to cheat them or lie to them or in any way create problems for them. As much as we can, we will not do that. They can trust us. And then also cultivating kindness, compassion, patience, all these qualities we read about all the time. But often we don't incorporate them in our daily life. When we sit in meditation, in formal practice, we make all these nice aspirations of how we're going to do this and do that, and may I have this, and may I have that. But when we go outside, where is those aspirations? We don't recognize that even in our everyday life, in our family, with our work, with our social life, with just being in this world, that is the practice. How do we maintain our equilibrium? How do we maintain our balance, our awareness, our openness of heart? Otherwise, what's the point? We talk about bodhicitta and enlightening all beings, but then we get annoyed with those very beings that we're supposed to be helping to gain liberation. So what's the point? If we are genuine, then our everyday life should, as it is, be our practice. And the hard parts are often the best practice, right? Like doing exercise. Those machines which challenge us most are the ones which we should get work on. Mind you, I don't like my pacer, so I can't really talk. Anyway, the point is that there are good desires and bad desires, and we should cultivate the aspiration to really use everything which happens in our life as our practice, and not make a big separation between when we're in a Dharma center and when we're at home or somewhere where there is no Dharma. Obvious Dharma, but everybody is our teacher. Everybody can be teaching us something. And we can't talk about, universal love if we don't try, even a little bit. Slowly, more and more and more. And we can look back and think, well, maybe somehow something really has shifted inside, because we all have the potential to be free. Ultimately, we already all are free. We just don't recognize it. That's our tragedy. But I always think, well, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are smiling. That's encouraging, right? They're not grimacing or going, oh, God, that lot. They were smiling at us, encouragingly. And they believe in our potential, because they can see it. And they can see how close we are to that, but how we don't see it, usually. And so they feel tremendous compassion for us, because we have such potential as human beings. And yet, again and again, we miss the score. We just don't get it. So the Dharma is very clear. One of the things about the Dharma is that it doesn't just say, for example, be kind, but it gives us techniques and methods to cultivate kindness. And so all the things which it asks us to try, it also gives methods by which we can accomplish, if we make the effort. And that's why I think the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are smiling, because they can see behind it all we're all okay. We just don't know it yet. And if that's for oneself, that includes all beings everywhere. All beings have the potential to waken up. But most of the time we are stuck in this prison house of samsara, and it's very hard to find a way out. But having come to the Dharma, we should rejoice. Because the gates to the liberation, the gates to the deathless are wide open. Nobody's locked them. We just have to find the key and walk in. So we should not despair. There's nothing to despair about. Working in the social sector among vulnerable communities, it sometimes becomes overwhelming to deal with the constant pain and suffering on the one hand, and on the other, there is a frustration and anger at the system of indifference and injustice. Can you give some guidance on this, on how to balance? Well, of course, that many people, especially who are in the social services, have that twofold challenge. One, that there is so much suffering and injustice in the world, and at the same time there is so little encouragement from like the government or people who could actually change things to do anything about it. So that, I mean, so many people I know who are working in various avenues of the social system who are just so frustrated, not by the people they are trying to help, but by the bosses and the people who are actually behind the scenes doling out and I mean, we've seen it now in America, you know, in a big way, how little compassion there is for the helping and reaching out to the vulnerable. And for example, even also in Myanmar now with those, I mean, apart from the terrible military government, they also have had this terrible, terrible earthquake, which the epicenter was exactly that hill where all the monasteries are. I mean, how's that? And so most of the monasteries and temples and nunneries in Siang were destroyed. And at the same time, the government doesn't allow almost any of the aid agencies to go in there to help. So you have on the one hand all the pain and suffering from, you know, losing everything, and thousands of people died, and then all those injured. And at the same time, the fact that you can't get there to help them. So yes, I mean, it is a terrible pain. And I think at that time, it is very important also not to forget oneself. Because people give out and out and out all these really beautiful bodhisattva-like energy, trying to bring some help into difficult situations, but they forget to also look to themselves. So they're breathing out, but they're not breathing in. So it's very important to breathe in as well as breathing out. I mean, it's like if I'm offering somebody to drink some water, I have to make sure that there's water in the glass to offer them. If the glass is empty because we haven't given any attention to giving myself any water, then I've got nothing to offer. So it's very heart-rending, but it's also very important that we do not neglect to give help and kindness and compassion also to ourselves. It's like, you know, with a smartphone, you have to keep recharging. If you don't recharge, it goes flat, and then it's no use to anybody. So it's not selfish to give attention also to oneself and one's own needs in order to empower us to be able to give out to others. And to send lots and lots of love also to all those people who are causing the problems in the first place. Not to, in your heart, make a division. But, you know, as the Buddha said, we give love to ourselves, to those that we care about, like our families and our partners and whoever, and then to people we're indifferent towards because we don't know them, and then to people who are really very difficult and causing a lot of trouble. Everybody should receive the healing waves of our loving compassion, without any exception, and not just humans, of course, animals, birds, fish, insects. Beings seen and beings unseen, so also all the spirit realms. And the whole universe, which is vast. There's no one anywhere who is not worthy of love. And so in these difficult situations, we have to really do what we can, recognize that we cannot do everything, it just isn't possible. And yet, at the same time, also give out our love and compassion to those who are causing the problems in the first place. May they be well and happy. But then, back to oneself. May I be well and happy. So, otherwise we burn out. And we lose hope. And we lose any, in the end we lose even any desire to try to help, because it all seems so hopeless. And yet one by one, you know, things can happen. But it has to be to everyone, not just to those victims, but also to the perpetrators, because they also need lots of compassion. This is samsara. And though we might try to make samsara as comfortable as possible, which is very much on the modern day agenda, nonetheless, however hard we strive, samsara is dukkha. And we have to accept that. Even the Buddha could not stop his clan, the Sakyas, from being wiped out. Even Jesus couldn't get rid of the Romans from Israel. I don't think they tried. We have to accept that if we have planted negative seeds, negative things are going to come up. Poisonous plants will come from poisonous seeds, and we've, in our history, planted endless poisonous seeds, and who knows where we were at that time, what we were up to. So we do the best we can. We try to help where help is possible, and we give out where it isn't possible. Anyway, we give out goodwill and good feelings, and we pray that they may all eventually overcome their suffering and be well and happy. But the point is that we cannot solve the problems of the world. But we can solve small problems of the world. We can make somebody smile. We can make somebody laugh. That's enough. I mean, some people seem to be called to do great things and beautiful things, and that's wonderful. But for the average person, you know, we can only do a little bit here, a little bit there, but with the right motivation, and at the same time, not forgetting self-cultivation as well, because what you breathe in, then you breathe out. And just have to accept that even with the best will in the world, we cannot solve the world's problems. All the world's problems are enormous. And most of them have been created by us humans. I mean, if we stopped messing around, the world would be sort of fairly okay. After all, you know, lions and bears are very few. They don't normally cause too much problem. I mean, it's the human lions and bears which cause the problem. This fly is very happy. Even flies want to be happy. You know, they have their desires, and if they can find a nice place to stop, and then they clean themselves, and you know, they're feeling good. We are all interconnected. And really, it's very sad what is happening in the world today, considering that we have the means to alleviate so much of this suffering right now. If people would just wake up, then so much, I mean, all the billions and billions of dollars which could, you know, cure so much, all the medicines, all the outreach, which we could easily, it's there. There's more than enough food to feed the planet. There's more than enough money to build everybody nice houses. There's more than enough of everything on this planet right now. But because people are caught up in their greed and anger and delusion, it's never going to work. So what to do? So send out love, send out joy, and don't give up. And we've got lots of rounds to go yet, so maybe next time round we'll all be ruled by AIs who will be ever so much more intelligent and stick us all under fences so we can't get out too quickly, and then maybe teach us all how to be good humans when they rule the world. Right? Who knows? Don't laugh. It could happen. It couldn't be any worse than what we're doing. Yeah, so this person is asking about how to balance material world and spiritual world. The thing is to bring them together and not make a divide between this is dharma, this is spiritual, and this is just samsara, worldly activity. If we think like that, then they never come together, and there will be no real inner transformation. But if we recognize that everything which we do everywhere, whether in retreat or whether working out in the world or whatever we are doing, if we do it with genuine loving awareness and presence, it's a Dharma practice. There's no difference. There's no difference between sitting in retreat, saying your mantras, and going out and working to bring an income in for your family. It's all the same. it all comes from the mind. So what is our mind doing? That's the question. Our mind can be in retreat. I mean, the Tibetans have a saying, you know, body in the cave, mind in the bazaar. And it's true. Or, the Buddha said, when you are in the bazaar, keep a cave and forest mind. So, it's up to us, right? We're making the physical is not the point. The point is, what's the mind doing? What is our mind doing under all these different sets of circumstances? Because it's the mind which gets liberated, not the body. So, when you're in the bazaar, be aware. The Buddha, I mean, it's a little bit too heavy, but the Buddha said, imagine you are walking through a crowded bazaar, and on your head you are carrying a vase, a pitcher filled to the brim with oil. And you're walking through the bazaar with all the people. And behind you is walking a soldier with an upraised sword, ready to cut off your head if you spill even a drop of oil. Would you be mindful or not? Said the Buddha. So while that gives a rather a tight image, and actually our awareness should be more open than that, it nonetheless also points to the fact that we need to be really, very, very present, especially in challenging situations like walking through a bazaar. Is our mind going here, there, all over the place? Or are we centered and focused? That's the point. Don't worry about the guy behind with the sword. Just look at the mind and see, are we present with what's happening in this moment? I mean, normally nowadays, like if you go to Palmo, you have to be mindful because of all the traffic. You're likely to get run over if you forget. But nonetheless, the point is that whether one is in retreat is the fact that one is in retreat is no indication that one is really practicing. The fact that one is out in the world is no indication that one is not really practicing. So, under all situations and in all contingencies, we should keep a very open, spacious, present sense of presence of what is going on inside ourselves, and at the same time what is going on outside, and the interconnection between the two. Because the interconnection is our organs, our eyes and ears and nose and tongue. The brain itself doesn't know. We think that the brain is telling us what is on the outside. But the brain itself is blind and deaf and dumb, and it's centered in the middle of the cranium. It doesn't know anything. It just gets messages sent to it by the sense organs. And out of that, it has to try to contrive some kind of movie which we can all agree on, and that will help us to live. But actually, I mean, it's quite fascinating when you think about the implications that the mind doesn't actually have a clue what's going on outside, apart from the signals it gains from our sense organs. And some neuroscientists have even suggested that 70, 80% of what the brain informs us we are seeing is just made up. Because it doesn't know. It can only try to make a picture so that we can relate to it. So they call it controlled, because it's controlled by the fact that we all have more or less the same kind of senses. It's a controlled hallucination. That's not Nagarjuna. That's present-day neuroscientists. So, whether we are in retreat or whether we are out in the world, we are moment to moment to moment creating our own fantasy, our own dream. In traditional texts it says it's like an illusion, like a mirage, like the reflection of the moon in water. It's trying to show us that what we actually perceive is not necessarily what's actually out there. And a different animal or insect would perceive things in a very different way, but it's the same, it's a reality also for that insect or animal. And so as humans, we have the same kind of connection to see more or less the same sort of things. But actually what is out there, nobody knows. So therefore, the only thing to do is to really learn and understand about our own mind. And now even, neuroscientists and others are meditating because they recognize that consciousness can never be, they don't know what consciousness is. I mean, this is one good thing, at least they're being more honest. They haven't got a clue what consciousness is. They can't find it. It's not in the brain, but they don't know where it is. And you can't catch it on a machine. And you can't see it in somebody else. And the only place where we can see consciousness is within our own minds. And so now more and more scientists are recognizing, yeah, you're right, the only thing to do is to sit down and look inside, because outside they don't know. So aren't we lucky, is the answer to this, because we all have our practices, we all have our meditations, and most people have some guidelines, and there are many, books and things on the internet to help us and guide us, and also many living masters still around. And so we have an enormous advantage over so much of the world who don't know that the answer to it all is within our own hearts. So please, when you go back, recognize that whether you are sitting on your cushion or whether you are out dealing with your family or the world, that all of it is your practice, right? There's no time. Even dreams, I mean, Tibetans are great one on dream yoga. So they don't give you any peace, right? You're all the time, whatever you're doing, in the bathroom, in the bedroom, in the living room, out on the streets, there's always a good practice to do something, right? How wonderful. Sometimes people are a little bit difficult and sometimes disappointing. But Dharma is never disappointing. Dharma is a true refuge. And we should be very grateful that it's still very alive, very real, and that there are still masters in this world who can help us. And so really and truly, we should be very, very grateful that we are still living in a time when the Dharma is alive and real. Who knows how long that will last, but it's here now. And we're very, very fortunate, so we should, all of us, pray that the Dharma may flourish and grow. And the Buddha himself, what is interesting also, is that the Buddha, after the Buddha's enlightenment, in the Maha Parinirvana Sutta, it says, that just before the Buddha is going to go into Mahaparinirvana, Mara, who represents everything which is opposed to enlightenment, comes along and says, okay, look, oh Bhagavan, when you first got enlightened in Bodh Gaya, I came to you and said, okay, now you've got it. You spent so many eons striving for Buddhahood. Now you're a Buddha. Lovely. You can go now. And you said, oh no, Mara. First, I have to firmly establish the fourfold Sangha. When the fourfold Sangha is hearing and thinking about, analyzing, and practicing then the Dharma, then it is time for me to go. So right from the start, the Buddha envisioned as very important the fourfold Sangha of monks, nuns, laymen, laywomen, all his followers, that they should not just that the lay people should be supporting the Sangha, but that everybody should be studying it and thinking about it and putting it into practice. Then, he said, the Dharma will flourish. Now, in Asia, throughout the centuries, that was a little bit downplayed, and all the attention for studying and practicing and so forth was handed over mainly to the monks. As a result, good thing is that they very scrupulously maintained the Dharma to the present day, because, you know, they were being supported by the lay people, and in order that they could become professionals. And so all the knowledge and understanding was mostly in the hands of the monks, who held the Dharma very preciously, and it carried on until the present day. Now, for the first time, actually, in 2,000 years, the shift has come that most of the practitioners are lay people. And among the lay people, many of them are women. This is the first time it's happened in Buddhist history like this. I mean, if not just in Asia, but also in the West, you go to a Dharma talk, even if the teacher is a monk, a lama, nonetheless, the majority of the audience will be lay people, and among that, the majority will be women. And they are not just ordinary women, but highly educated women, right? You give you a book in your language to read, you can read it and you understand it. This is very rare. I mean, we take it for granted. But actually, this is really a very recent phenomenon, that there should be so many lay followers who are as educated and often as, done retreats and whatever, as the professionals, the monks. And so the monks themselves have to change, because they have been brought up, like in the Tibetan Sangha or wherever, since they were very small. Especially the incarnate lamas, the tulkus, the youngsters, without women, not even their mother often, in monasteries, trained to teach other monks. But now, when they are going forward, since the exile, most of the audience are not monks. Most of the audience are lay people, women. So it's very interesting to watch how now these modern young lamas are changing to encompass the lifestyles of their audience, which is very, very different from how originally they were trained. It's interesting. We don't know what's going to happen because it has never happened like that before. But they are very conscious that now they have, most of their students are very devoted, very sincere, very intelligent, and likewise now many of them are, many of the scholars and the translators and more the teachers are lay people and often women. So it's interesting. And we will see. I mean, when Buddhism is very amenable. When it went to China, it became Chinese. When it went to Sri Lanka or Thailand or Korea or wherever it went, it changed its outer form to fit in with the culture of that place. So if you see a Sri Lankan on one hand and a Chinese on the other hand, you might think they were different. But when you get to the real core of the teaching, it's very noticeable how they are really just about identical. It's like, you know, you have a porcelain pot and a glass pot and a gold pot and a clay pot, but the liquid inside is the same. And so it looks very different, but it's surprisingly, the view is very, very similar, even though they have been apart from each other. That's the other thing. For the first time, all these different traditions are coming together and meeting each other. When you go to pilgrimage places, you see all different colors of robes. And also on the internet, etc., you can contact. Now, you know, you can get, in the morning you can have a talk on Pure Land, and in the afternoon you can have a talk on, you know, Mahamudra, and then next day you can have a talk on something else. I mean, there's so much out there now, in a way which there never was before. And the audience are highly educated and intelligent and are able to appreciate what is being taught. When these geshes and so forth teach, they're teaching now at really quite an advanced level and expecting that their audience will be following them. I mean, in Tibet, no geshe would ever give a talk for how many days on emptiness to a group of lay people, because they would recognize that these lay people would not be able to follow. But they expect all these foreigners and Indians who do not have a background in Buddhism, that they will be able to follow and will be benefited by these advanced philosophical teachings. So we are living in a very interesting age. We don't know where it's going to go, because we've never been there before. This is an unknown path. Let's see. But each one of you has the potential to awaken. Don't forget that. It's not something over there. It's somebody so close. The Tibetans say that the nature of the mind, the realization of the nature of the mind is so close that it's like the eyelashes. It's too close, we can't see them. And likewise, the nature of the mind is so close to us, and to our consciousness. We're conscious, but it's so close we don't see it, because we're always looking over there. So, our job now is all to wake up. And may all beings be well and happy. And I'm sorry if I just go blah, 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 blah. Please excuse old age, what to do. Sono dia tange se bani toni ne patana pamse ne chakana je bala tu paese beso le do wa shu jamba ba jita jamba dan kondo sambo te ande sinde de da kunji je so dalo chi ke wa dia tange ratu mo cha cho sen cho rin bo je ma che bana je che wa nyamba me pa yang go ne kondo pe wa shu